Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Caroline, so Secretary Hegseth announced yesterday that Army recruiting levels have reached 12-year highs in December, 15-year highs in January. What is making young people want to serve the military under the Trump administration, and how does that contrast to Biden's failure consistently to meet recruiting average? Does DEI President Trump's anti-DEI agenda play a role in this?
Well, first of all, the recruitment level for all branches of our military are at crisis levels, and it serves as a national security risk that our military branches are not fully staffed to where they need to be. And I do believe it's a culture problem within these institutions that the president is very much committed to fixing, as emphasized by the executive orders he has signed to root DEI out of the military. And I think when young men and women who are honorably signing up to serve in our nation's military see somebody like Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, who is a proven warfighter, who risked his life in battle for this country, who understands what it means to deploy and to defend the Constitution and your nation abroad and to put your life on the line. When they see a leader like that and a leader like President Trump, who is committed to peace through strength, that's very inspiring. And we look forward to seeing those recruitment numbers and retention numbers skyrocketing over the next 4 years. And I know Pete Hegseth is committed to increasing recruitment at all branches of the military. I would defer you to the Department of Defense on exactly what he plans to implement.
Welcome back to Truth Thursday, folks. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, wokeism in America's military is the fight, and the fight to end it is continuing and has to continue. You know, the first step in solving a problem is to recognize that you have one. And we're fortunate enough now we have a commander-in-chief and a secretary of defense that did exactly that. They ran, you know, the boss ran on that, and they fully see the problems caused by wokeism in all its forms in our armed forces. The distractions of these unnecessary policies do a lot of things. They harm readiness. You just heard about the recruiting. That clip was from late January of this year, right after the inauguration. And the overall ability of our nation to defeat our enemies in war. That's our job at the Department of Defense. And we have many enemies. We need a DOD focused only on how to strengthen our defense systems and personnel with the right strategies and with the best people, regardless of the color of their skin or any other difference that somebody wants to make up. Warfighting lethality that deters wars. That is the mission. And we now have a team focused on developing the strategy and policies necessary to achieve that mission. But the Department of Defense is the most massive organization, and it will take time and extreme determination to find and eliminate every woke policy and the individuals resisting the changes. Well, my guest today to discuss all this is the Claremont Institute's Will Thibeau. Will is an Army Ranger veteran and director of the American Military Project at the Institute, focusing on issues like this. Will, welcome to the Rob Maness Show. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, sir. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, tell folks a little bit more about your background and the Claremont Institute and this project you're heading up there, and what its focus is before we dive too further into it.
Claremont is an organization dedicated to the political underpinnings of the American founding. And it's an organization then that is dedicated to making sure that those are properly understood and made manifest in the critical institutions of our nation in 2025, you know, now almost 250 years after our nation's founding. And, in 2023, the chairman of the board, Tom Klingenstein, our president, Ryan Williams, saw it fit to establish the American Military Project. Never before had we specifically applied a proper understanding of the American military as an institution to kind of the institute's purview, and now it is. And I think it was high time because we were in the midst of the chaos of the Biden administration, kind of the mask coming off of how DEI has overtaken the military, or how it had, and now we're in the position to influence recovery to the American military as the institution it should be for the rest of the 21st century.
I love it. I'm a fan of the Claremont Institute. I personally know a lot of the fellows that have gone through the system there. You guys do great work. And there's some data that backs up what we talk about in this issue. Let's talk about the recruiting thing for a second. I think the years were 23 to 24. White males were at their lowest recruiting levels, I believe, since we started counting it. Is that correct? Under the Biden administration?
That's right, Colonel Maness. We found Army internal data that revealed the proportion of white soldiers was at its lowest in recorded history. It had followed a 6-year decline in the share of white recruits in relation to the rest of the Army. And this reasonably bore out in the other services as well. And so white Americans were making up a smaller and smaller percentage of the military. But critically, the more diverse populations of America were not joining at increased rates, despite all the money and attention devoted to trying to facilitate diversity recruitment. They were not joining at the increased rates to make up for this decline, in the share of white recruits. But I will say, I think the rapid recovery of recruitment levels in every branch, in particular the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, is a sign that this was more than a sociological phenomenon, but the decline of white recruits was actually policy, decades-long affirmative action policy in the military having its intended effect of reducing the number of white people in uniform in the hopes of having a more racially diverse force. We stopped those policies almost day one of the Trump administration, and we've seen this rapid and fast recovery that I think outpaces the movement of public opinion. That's an important distinction to highlight just how brazen and crazed the racial politics of the Biden DOD had become.
Yeah, just so folks understand what Will just said, look, it wasn't that families of white boys and men were saying, hey, we're not going to join. It was by policy that was not recruiting and drawing in white males that are enlistment age and officer accession age, not necessarily like I'm up from a generational military family. We actually stopped recruiting when we saw the racial policies get out of control. I took that back up once this president got elected. And most families did that I talked to, which is a pretty wide anecdotal set of data. So I think that's had some effect on the recruiting numbers. But I think it's important to note, and there was an article either out today or just yesterday, that women numbers of recruiting are also through the roof, aren't they? So this isn't about just race, gender, and that kind of stuff. It's something deeper than that, right?
Well, I think what that shows, sir, is that Americans want to serve in a military that, one, gives every person a fair shot at success, regardless of immutable characteristics that they can't control about their life, their race, or their sex. And they also, secondly, they want to serve in a military that will be used in a way that benefits the American interest. I think you and I were both part of militaries who fought in long, far-flung wars in the Middle East, in what I think any American can see is for uncertain, untested outcomes and an uncertain benefit to the American way of life. What I think people are responding to is a trust and confidence in President Trump, Secretary Hegseth, people like Secretary Rubio too, that they are going to make the decisions about military force in a way that directly benefits the American way of life. You have to have both as a part of this equation, because when you have both, you have an environment and a military that people really want to serve, and an institution that folks, of which they want to be a part. Because as both you and I know, it is such a life-changing institution, but it comes at a great cost. It comes at personal sacrifice. So you're not going to do it unless you do have confidence that your service will be worthwhile and that you will be treated fairly and not discriminated against. Those are two crucial pillars of the recovery and the restoration of the American military under President Trump.
Yeah, you're exactly right, man. So specifically, what have you observed that the Secretary of Defense and the President, policy-wise, have put in place that are now functioning? Are you observing that those policies are functioning well? What are they? And then what do we have to watch out for when it comes to getting this stuff out?
Well, let me set kind of some example of what had taken place even in the final years of the Biden administration. Even when Republicans had majorities in Congress, you would see efforts to restore merit in the military, or reemphasize the value of the military profession. But you wouldn't see a confrontation with the policies that made things like racial quotas so prevalent in the military. So what Secretary of Defense Hegseth did, I think, in his first few days in charge of the Pentagon, was he ended the consideration of race and sex for military personnel and programs in a way that had never been done since the Truman administration. No longer will we see the policies like Secretary Hicks signed, Deputy Secretary of Defense Hicks signed, where she established force-wide quotas for every DoD civilian and uniformed service member, meaning that every promotion of every rank and grade for civilians and for service members had to accord with certain racial outcomes. This was the kind of absurdity in which we were mired during the Biden administration. And Secretary Hegseth, just kind of jumped the gun and did what we had been laboring to do for too long, and he ended that insanity. That's having its intended effect. No longer will West Point or the Naval Academy, for example, be able to categorize admissions classes based on race. That's also going to be true of every command within the military. But I think the kind of broader point of which I'm really proud of Secretary Hegseth and President Trump for confronting is asking serious questions of how the senior officer class in the military was part of the problem. I think we like to tell ourselves that this was an issue of political appointees who were carrying out a political agenda of their respective administration, when in reality, generations of military officers had become inculcated in this paradigm of diversity, equity, inclusion, and leftist politics. And so you saw, for example, a three-star admiral who would encourage other naval officers to scrutinize laws passed by Congress because so many elected representatives were white men. You saw, Army infantry brigade commanders denigrating pro-life Americans on Twitter at the time. And I think Secretary Hegseth and President Trump understand that this is absurd, and that if it means that we're going to fire generals and admirals who behaved like this and who allowed this to happen, that's okay, because that's going to restore trust in the institution of the American military with the American people, who will one day send their sons and daughters into uniform.
Yeah, and reestablishing merit-based selections and competition and promotions and those kind of things. I'm all for that. I'm a original board of advisors member for STARS, the Air Force Academy group that was created by graduates, and I had the opportunity to serve with on that. One of the things that I'm concerned about, and we're going to take a break here in a second, Will, but so be thinking about this as we go into the next one. next deal is I watched the Board of Visitors meeting that was broadcast at the Air Force Academy last week, and I'm so glad that people like Charlie Kirk have been appointed to the Board of Visitors there, and Maureen Bannon and General Flynn are on the West Point Board of Visitors, because we have to have clear-eyed people that understand the issue there. But one of the things that disturbed me, and we'll take it up after this break, is that the current admissions colonel is still the same one that was pushing DEI, critical race theory, and racial quotas for admissions out there at the Air Force Academy. And she actually spoke at that Board of Visitors meeting. I want to get your take on what are the things we need to look for, and what's the right way for us to ask the Secretary and the President to make sure we go all the way and hold people accountable, plus make sure that the resistors are no longer in place to cause future damage. We'll be right back with Will Thibeau, the director of the American Military Project at the Claremont Institute.
So at the Defense Department, we're doing three critical things at his direction. Number one, we're restoring the warrior ethos. We're getting back to basics. Standards, accountability, readiness, training, warfighting, lethality. We're not a college or a university. We're not interested in your woke garbage and your political correctness.
The Rob Maness Show here on Truth Thursday, and that's what we're talking about, is the leadership of this country recognizes that wokeism is a danger, especially in our armed forces, and Secretary Hegseth is all over it. The President of the United States is all over it. We are killing DEI and anything like it and wokeism in the Department of Defense. But as I said in my opening, it's a vast, massive organization, and we know there are resistors still in place, and they're not necessarily political appointees. And that's one of the questions that I have that I hope my guest today, Will Thibeau, who's the director of the American Military Project at the Claremont Institute, has been thinking about that and can make some recommendations on what the average citizen that's observing this and cares about it should be doing. Will, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Great to be here.
Yeah. So as I mentioned on the outro for that last segment, the admissions director that was the previous administration's admissions director. Now she's a commissioned officer, a colonel in the United States Air Force. I'm not calling for somebody who's firing, but if the same individual that was practicing those same policies, and not just in a way, in a non-ideological way, but in a very aggressive way, is still in place, how can we be assured that the death of wokeism is really and truly happening? And I think a lot of people are concerned about that. I get that question all the time.
It is such an important point, sir. Although the uniform should obviate any political allegiance or political party affiliation, it doesn't mean that the people who wear the uniform are any less human than you or I. And
Right.
you highlighted something crucial as well. The military didn't merely tolerate DEI. The military and officers like the admissions officer at the Air Force Academy that you mentioned, they embraced it as an ideology that was somehow necessary to national security. You would hear superintendents of each military academy testify on how critical it was that we categorized admissions classes based on race. They wanted cadets and midshipmen to look a certain way based on the color of their skin. And that was something they at least convincingly portrayed that they believed. And so I think, simply an understanding that, perhaps the same people who did that under oath and fulfilled those policies are not the right people to then undermine and let go of the same policies that they so vigorously defended. It's not to disrespect them as people. It's not to denigrate their service in uniform, but it is to be honest with, I think the administration itself and the American people that we need new leaders in place who understand that DEI and race-based qualifications and classifications have no place in our nation's military. Let's get leaders who don't have this baggage, and let's get folks who can dutifully adhere to the orders of the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense. Because we've seen how this, transcends different policy areas. President Trump gave the order to withdraw Afghanistan, about halfway through his first term, and it never happened. You saw Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, calling his Chinese counterpart to walk him through U.S. nuclear posture and policy actions, complete violation of the chain of command. So I think there's a broader reconsideration of how the military relates to civilian control that is necessary and can be rectified with accountability over the complete, runaway train that DEI became under the Biden administration and the administrations of too many presidents before Joe Biden.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You kind of touched on the senior officer accountability issue in the last segment, and when I saw and heard about this admissions officer or director, the director of admissions out there, I was like, well, the person that I would hold accountable would be the first general officer in the chain of command there for not having reviewed their personnel. And maybe they have reviewed it and she's on her way out to PCS to another job or retire or those kind of things. I don't know. But we have to find a way to hold the senior decision makers accountable, because they are the ones making these decisions to either keep somebody in place and continue with that service in that same policy position, or to get somebody new that will actually implement policy in a constitutional way, which means they're following the orders of the commander in chief and the secretary of defense and act aggressively implementing the policy in a lawful way. So we've got to find a way to do that. And I get that question a lot too, Will. What are some of the things that Claremont and you have recommended of how we hold these folks accountable? I've made all kinds of recommendations, but I haven't really seen any true accountability yet outside of two sets of areas. One is all the JAGs, the senior JAGs in the services were fired primarily, I believe, because of the illegal legal advice they gave on the unlawful order for the COVID shot mandate. And then CQ Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was let go. And as chief of staff, he actually signed a letter with the Secretary of the Air Force then that demanded that the Air Force look like those demographic percentages and saying that we had too many white male fighter pilots and air combat pilots, which is ridiculous to set goals and objectives like that, even in an implicit way. But they actually signed a memo. So we've seen some of that. The vice chief of the staff of the Air Force was a very DEI-oriented, woke-oriented, COVID vaccine mandate aggressive guy, and he was let go. But that's about it, really. The Mark Milleys of the world, the superintendents of the academies, those kind of folks. There really needs to be some level of meaningful accountability. And I'm not saying everybody should go to jail and those kind of things, but maybe one of them should be investigated for a court martial, Mark Milley, through a legal process, not a retribution type process. I mean, what are you guys thinking about and talking about at Claremont about this issue?
I mean, we established that accountability for senior military officers has to be part of fixing and restoring the military's ethos. And, to give the administration a little bit more credit, they let go of Admiral Donnelly. I think one thing, just as a quick aside, it was so easy for conservatives in the media to kind of pick on junior enlisted drag queens and, soldiers who posted TikToks, on their own account. And I don't support any of, of that out, or, I don't support much of what was expressed by those junior enlisted soldiers and sailors, but I don't think they're the problem. I think the problem is the chain of command who allows that to happen. So Admiral Donnelly was a guy who had Navy sanctioned drag shows on the aircraft carrier of which he was supposedly in command. His promotion came up again. It even kind of snaked through in the middle of the night through the Senate, and he passed. And was going to be the commander of 7th Fleet. But to his great credit, Pete Hegseth pulled his nomination back. Ensured that he lost that job because he had a track record of politicizing the military by allowing these absurd drag shows on aircraft carriers. That's great leadership. And I think there's more to come. I think it's about getting a control and a sense of evaluation on the generals and admirals that we promote. And, it has to be a part of conservative governance. The Bill Clinton administration, the Obama administration, they had no problem with putting the thumb on the scale for how officers were educated and informed. They had no problem being very selective about who were the top ranking generals in the military. Conservatives and especially now Republicans in the Trump administration must understand that this is part of governance, that we have to ensure that the uniformed military leaders are going to be accountable to the politically accountable civilian leaders who are constitutionally obligated to lead the military. This will mean firing more people, to your point, sir, but it will also mean building out a process for how we select, teach, and promote officers so that the crop of leaders is much better than what we've seen for the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm very pleased to see retired Brigadier General Anthony Tata is now the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. He's got Stu Scheller there as a senior advisor. I think there's some challenges they have with the rest of the reinstatement process for the COVID vax folks that were harmed by that. But they're also looking at the promotion selection process and how do we make a general or an admiral, and that gets right at the heart of the matter for the long-term solution as far as how do we hold people accountable. They can build that in or rebuild it in. I think it was probably there previously. I didn't come up in a military where you had partisan generals or colonels. Or even senior enlisted folks like what we see today. It's really mind-boggling. So I'm pleased with that. I'm happy with it. Before I let you go, I know you got to bounce here, but let's talk a little bit about something else you touched on, and that is people are joining again because they can count on the leadership not to waste their lives, essentially. And make decisions to put us in endless wars, which is a policy change that I have voted for many times now, twice for Donald Trump to get that done. And from that perspective, your thoughts on the meeting tomorrow with Vladimir Putin and Russia, where we think we might be able to get going on this Ukraine-Russia war so that the United States and NATO and the West aren't focusing on that anymore, and the United States can focus on rebuilding its strength so we can deter China, threats like China instead of having to go to war with everybody.
It's in many ways the essential question of this administration in the Donald Trump foreign policy. I think the Donald Trump foreign policy is, of course, America first. and it is meant to resolve the senseless conflicts that have come to define our geopolitics for, even the 20th century. And, he ended, he set the conditions to end the war in Afghanistan. He obviously campaigned, in part at least, on ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. And he's not going to do that, without a deal that serves America, that protects our allies, and makes it known to Vladimir Putin in Russia that this cannot be a way of life and a way of doing business, so to speak, within America, who can stand for world peace without being a policeman. That's, I think, the trust that the American people have in Donald Trump, is that we're going to seek reasonable solutions to conflicts so they don't become quagmires, and so they also don't escalate in a way that draws in American blood and treasure for causes that don't relate to the well-being of the American people. That's something President Trump understands intimately, and I think that's the mindset he has going into tomorrow in Alaska. He's going to resolve this conflict in a way that serves the American interest, because he knows that the war cannot continue forever. Thank God we have a president who doesn't want a war to continue forever. It's almost absurd to say that, but that is what Donald Trump represents. And that's why I think Americans want to serve in the military under his command, because he's going to take care and respect the degree of their sacrifice.
Absolutely right, Will. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about these issues today. Thank you for your work and Claremont's work as they continue this. We support you. We're with you. I work in the similar issues and on the same lines and everything every single day that I'm out here. And God bless you guys.
God bless you, sir. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for your service.
All right. You can find him on X, and there are links to Claremont and those organizations in his bio on X there. And I'll be right back with the audience right here on Truth Thursday. We're going to go open mic for the last half of the show.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
We are leaving wokeness and weakness behind. No more pronouns, no more climate change obsession, no more emergency vaccine mandates, no more dudes in dresses. We're done with that shit.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Wokeism in the Department of Defense. We are leaving it behind. I had to play another clip of him in a different setting. That's Secretary Pete Hegseth talking about that. And these are not recent clips. They are from several months ago, early in the administration. But the vector is set. The throttles are set. We are full speed ahead on removing these distractions from the men and women's lives who sign up to defend this country with a blank check, which includes up to and including their own life, if necessary, to defend it. And that's why it's important to point out that men and women are signing up in record numbers to serve in the armed forces, young men and women, because they have the confidence in the current commander-in-chief and Secretary of Defense and senior civilian leader, political appointed leadership, that their lives and their sacrifice won't be wasted. These decisions will be made in the context of putting their country first, and not in the context doing things like building democracies in some part of the world that will never accept that democracy and it will only cost blood and treasure. Those policy days are over from what we can see in the Trump administration and this Department of Defense, and rightly so. I have worked for it for a long, long time, and I'll say it over and over again. We are living in a time that we should all be grateful for, because the road we were on and the path we were on only led to more death and destruction and possibly the complete loss of what's left of this republic that our founders left us. We're going to go open mic and take questions from the audience, and we'll go over to our host over there. Patriot Rob's hosting today, standing in for Shell. Thank you very much, Rob. Who's up first?
My pleasure, Colonel, always. We have Wib, sir.
Thank you, Patriot Rob. Thank you, Colonel. My question is about holding the senior officers to account for what's gone before. Do you believe that we should have a zero tolerance approach to it, or do you believe that there should be a certain threshold of offense before they are held to account?
Well, the way the Uniform Code of Military Justice is designed, there are various levels of accountability that can be applied depending on the severity of the action that drives that accountability and that discipline. For the phrase maintaining good order and discipline. That's the core issue, that if we don't hold the command chains accountable for things like the unlawful implementation of what turned out to be an unlawful order, according to what the SecDef has now codified in his own comments for that COVID-19 vaccine mandate that was implemented by the Biden administration, if there's no accountability for that, then you stand to lose good order and discipline all the way down the ranks to the lowest ranking individual, because people are human beings, right? They talk. Anybody that's been in the military, especially as an enlisted person, like I have, know that the young person down at the E1 level, they're getting the information as it trickles all the way down, and now you have social media, so it's coming in laterally too. But that information is curated, filtered. It comes in multiple messages, and most of the time they believe it, especially if they get the message from, say, an E4. Everybody knows that served knows about the E4 mafia. I was one of them at one time. And if an E4 tells an E1 or an E2 something, they tend to believe it. Well, you won't have good order and discipline if the message that's coming down to those young men and women is constantly, well, if you're a colonel or a general or an admiral or a Navy captain or a Coast Guard captain or above, you can get away with breaking the law because, and here's one of the reasons why I'm concerned about it and why I continue to call for accountability on that issue, the COVID-19 order, vaccine order, and that is many of them did break the law by violating religious rights of their service members that are codified in a law called the Religious Restoration Act, Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Okay? And if blanket orders were given, like has been documented in court cases, to deny all religious accommodation requests, that's against the law. So that kind of law breaking has to be addressed in one way or another. And I think it's going to depend at your level of where you're at in the chain of command, and whether you implemented that order in an honorable and ethical way, which I can't see how it could be done if you're trampling on religious rights that are even codified in an additional piece of legislation outside of the Bill of Rights. So that law breaking has to be addressed in a meaningful way. What that meaningful way can be a lot of things. You know, for a officer, an official permanent letter of reprimand and the establishment of what's called an unfavorable information file it ends their ability to ever command. if they haven't been a commander yet. And if they've been a commander yet and say they're at the Eagle level, the colonel or captain level, or 1-star level, they're not going to move anymore and are going to be forced to retire fairly quickly. But there has to be some level of accountability for all of that chain of command, whether they're still on active duty or not, because if you don't, the good order and discipline of the service moving forward is going to be very difficult to reestablish and maintain. Very difficult. Does that answer your question, Wib?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's a good question. Who's next, Rob?
We have Liz, Colonel.
Good afternoon, Colonel. Rob, I wanted to ask, do you think that because they have gotten rid of the minutia of this DEI crap, they can go back to basic training and how to win wars, be prepared for war, and whatever, will cut out some of the confusion for these young people in what they can and can't do, or what they. I think a lot of people left the military because of just fear of doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, so on and so forth. You get where I'm going with this, Colonel, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a great question. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought it up. I was going to talk to Will about this in the second half of the show, and that is the Secretary of Defense has reestablished real boot camp and basic training. They're called shark attacks or tossing the barracks, that kind of thing. And here's the way things used to work. It's 2 a.m. You've landed in an airplane in the middle of the night. It's probably thunderstorming if you're in a place like San Antonio, Texas, where I was at age 17. It's 2 a.m. They bring you from the airport in an Air Force bus, and little do you know, unless you're really prepped well at age 17 anyway. And I was prepped well. My dad was a master sergeant. My older brother was enlisted in the Air Force by this time. So I knew. But it's still a shocking thing when you're ripped off of that bus and feet on the footprints there. And the drill sergeants, I remember the names today. I'm 60, almost 64. Okay, I was 17 this early morning. Tech Sergeant Reisman and Staff Sergeant Allen. Tech Sergeant Reisman was a tall, skinny guy with glasses and a very short mustache, but not quite Hitler-like. And Sergeant Allen was about 5'5" and had a black Hitler mustache, and he looked like him too. And those guys got me in in our case, it was a flight instead of a platoon. And our flight, and from day one, and they're in your face with that campaign brim in your nose, at your forehead, between your eyes, screaming and all that. And that was the beginning of your transformation into a warrior. Even in the Air Force, in our short 6-week, what they called basic training then, it was an effective tool for beginning the process of turning you into a warrior. And they stopped that, apparently. Well, Pete Hegseth is re-implementing it. Part of that process is, and the little guy, Sergeant Allen, Staff Sergeant Allen was the guy that did this, at about the time you got comfortable with how to like fold your clothes and make your bed without getting screamed at every 30 seconds, which was about, for us, it was about 8 days in, I think. Dark 30, 2 o'clock in the morning again on a Sunday morning, Staff Sergeant Allen would come in. Here comes the trash can down between the beds, right? You remember this, Liz. And we were on the 3rd floor of the 1,000-man barracks at Lackland Air Force Base. So that's where our flight lived. There's a door at the end of it. It's a fire escape door. Well, guess what happened? He tossed our barracks and every piece of bedding, every locker, every bed went out that stairway and flying down into the ground. And the next thing that we did was forming up downstairs in order to go get our stuff and run back up the stairs, bring it into the dormitory, into the barracks, and reestablish that barracks in less than 2 hours into a military fit barracks like we had been taught the first 8 days. He did that 2 times for us in a 6-week period. I know I'm talking about 6 weeks, but I think the Marine Corps boot camp's still about 11 or 12 weeks long. And I advocated the Air Forces should be at least 9, by the way, and get away from some of the softness that we saw even in our day. But Secretary Hegseth had to reestablish the ability to do that, because I guess drill sergeants, we call them MTIs, military training instructors in the Air Force. I guess those folks were getting hammered for being mean. War is not nice, folks. War is not nice. When you raise your right hand and take the oath of enlistment or the oath of office and swear to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and give that blank check to the government, you are becoming a warrior. You can't afford to be nice, because your life and your buddies' lives right next to you, in front of you, and behind you all depend on it, and that's who you're actually going to die for in war. Ask anybody that's been to war, especially infantry. They will tell you that people are giving their lives for their people next to them. That's who they love the most on earth. Every time I've ever asked anybody that question, I've gotten the same exact answer. Doesn't matter the service. We've got to take our last break. We'll be back in a minute. And when we come back, you're going to see a clip from a former Defense Advisory Board member, Susan Rice. And the President of the United States, Donald Trump, had to fire her. You'll see why. I'll be right back.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed.
Well, if you're a white male Christian cisgender macho MAGA man, you can be as dumb as a rock and be deemed qualified to serve as Secretary of Defense. That's apparently what we've learned from this episode. But let's also be clear. There's a serious point here. DEI has been used as a slur to suggest that anybody who might be a woman, might be a person of color, might be a religious minority, might have a disability, might be a religious minority, might be a veteran or of Native descent, anybody who has benefited in any way, shape, or form from the notion that we all should be treated equally and that we should be viewed on the basis of our merits and not discounted because we happen to be a woman or happen to be a person of color. Anybody who fits the mold of somebody who is not a white Christian cisgender male is by definition in this administration deemed inferior. That is the vast majority, Brian, of the people in this country.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and we're telling the truth here today. The show's title today is about wokeism in America's military and the fight to end it, and it continues. That was Susan Rice there. She was just fired this spring by Donald Trump from the DOD Advisory Board. That's the kind of crap that you heard spewing out of her mouth that has been infecting, infiltrating, and indoctrinating America's military members' minds. Think about it. Will Thibeau from the Claremont Institute is right. It was by policy that white males weren't coming in and signing up to serve. It was intentional by policy. And she tried to throw in, I hope everybody listened to that. She tried to throw in that if you want to be treated with merit and equally, then you're not wanted. Well, that's baloney. My colleagues and I know Mr. Thibeau's colleagues at Claremont Institute, they have been fighting to reinstate a meritocracy in the United States Armed Forces for years because of these racist objectives for things like admissions into our service academies. For years, and now we're doing it, and she has the audacity to lie and hang her hat on merit, on admitting people by merit and treating people equally? No. It's like the old Animal Farm book. Everybody's equal, but some are more equal than others. That's what you witnessed, and the American people and the American military lived through in the Biden administration. That is exactly what was going on. And we're going to end it. Thank God we have a president of the United States and a secretary of defense and other political appointees that understand what it means to let people into the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy or Coast Guard Academy or West Point Military Academy by merit and not caring what their immutable characteristics are. Because quite frankly, it doesn't matter if you're a white man or a black woman. Not everybody is cut out for military service, and not everybody is cut out for military leadership. You can't possibly field the best armed forces in the world that all of our enemies will be deterred by having racial or gender quotas and treating people differently under the law, which is what's been happening both inside the military and outside the military. Well, we're on open mic, so I don't want to rant too long. I got a hand up over there. Patriot Rob is our host. Go ahead, Patriot Rob. Who's next?
We have Buck, Colonel.
Colonel, pleasure to talk to you today. Rob, Shell. Yeah, just real quick, sir. It is 13 weeks, and Paris Island is a little bit tougher than the Hollywood Marines because we get to dance with the sand fleas. So when you're on a parade deck and getting eaten by sand fleas, you learn concentration real quick. Sir, my question to you is, do you think, and I'm very happy to see the change happening in the military, going back to war fighting and what we are supposed to do. But do you think that we will see, if there is a change in the administration, which we hope there won't be, but if there is in the future, that, our officer corps will start to invoke duty to disobey some of these unlawful orders that have been codified in the past, because we just don't seem to see it other than, Colonel Schiller, who, I donated and followed his story closely. I don't think he technically disobeyed, but yeah, like you said, he said, put your rank on there and stand on your decision. So do you think we'll see that going forward, sir? And will this current trend last?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. Look, ladies and gentlemen, outside of the U.S. Armed Forces, we have, as an officer, I'm speaking as an officer and a former commander now, we have a duty to disobey an unlawful order. If I gave an order that turned out to be unlawful, I expect my people to push back on that and not follow that order. That's what even our lowest enlisted ranks, we train that into our people. Where does that come from? That training comes from post-World War II and World War II, because what was the most common excuse by the German Nazi officer corps and the NCOs and enlisted that were killing people in concentration camps and shooting soldiers that had been captured in the back of the head and violating every norm and international law of war that had ever been written? What was their common excuse? I was following orders. in good faith. I can't tell you how many times I hear the words, well, so-and-so was implementing this order in good faith. That's the same thing. I was just following orders. That's why we train our people that it's not only their ethical responsibility, it's their duty to not follow an unlawful order. Is that easy? No. And Buck, you mentioned Stu Scheller. I don't think he violated a direct order explicitly, but he violated some policy about appearing in uniform. That's where they went for him in a video where he was disagreeing with and criticizing the most senior leadership in the armed forces. So that's where they went with him: conduct unbecoming, those kind of things. But others on the COVID vaccine thing did push back, and they were retaliated against. And this gets back to the accountability piece. We have to have some accountability outside of being able to establish good order and discipline under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. When you think about the retaliation that occurred from commanders and senior enlisted NCOs that were a direct part of the chain of command supporting those commanders, there has to be some accountability there, because they've all been trained like I was trained. They came after me. I know they had that training. It's not hugely in depth or anything, but the training is there, because we all know that it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do if you have to do it. And you're probably going to get punished, at least initially, until it's proven otherwise. But there are people being punished today from that unlawful order, even though it's been declared an unlawful order and the judicial system has said it was an unlawful order. They're still being punished today. So we have to have accountability. So I expect this to get a direct answer to your question, Buck. I have an expectation as an American citizen and as a professional military officer that's been a commander that those senior officers are going to have to fulfill that duty to disobey unlawful orders. Now, there's a op-ed in the New York Times by Pat Donahoe, retired Major General, today, talking about our expectations that military should be standing up against Trump, essentially to stop him from federalizing law enforcement in the District of Columbia and using the National Guard to help law enforcement, because the place is in the tank crime-wise. And I know what some of you idiots out there that are on the left are going to try to say, you narrative people. I've seen it today. Well, the crime rates are at their lowest possible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's because you got people like the guy that was just fired in the command chain that wasn't appropriately and rightly reporting those crimes. Because, as somebody said earlier in this show, there you have it. The Democrats will break any law to achieve their objectives. We're not going to do that. The president right now is following the law. He has a unique power in the District of Columbia, especially. The National Guard usually works at the behest of the governor. There is no governor there. The commander-in-chief is the commander-in-chief. I think he delegates it to the Secretary of the Army, and the mayor, under the Home Rule law that was unwisely passed by our Congress, has a role in it too. But the President of the United States has a unique role there. He's following the law, and it's necessary. Oh my goodness, have you seen some? There were gangs riding motorcycles on the World War II memorial like it was an oval racetrack. It's an oval. If you've ever been up there, go check it out. Just the other day. That kind of stuff has ended in the last 3 days, by the way. We're hearing reports from people that live there that are saying, hey, I can go out at night and I don't have to worry about gangs and murders and shootings and all that stuff right now. Because it's necessary. So that's a lawful order then. I don't expect any officer to disobey a lawful order. But if they think one is unlawful, they have a duty, not just a responsibility ethically, but a duty to disobey that and report that to whoever issued the order that they think it's unlawful and why, and work through that process as hard as it is. as hard as it is, and it's very difficult. Ask the 8,500 and up to almost 100,000 people that left over the COVID order and the 8,500 that were forced out over the COVID order. They'll tell you it's hard. I work with them. I've been working with them for several years now, all of them that I can work with. So it's very important. Well,
thank you, sir. And this old E5 will follow you up a hill if you ever need them.
Appreciate it. I was an E5 too. Thank you. All right. I'm out of time. I want to mention one thing, and that is I had an article published in Stars and Stripes yesterday calling for no artificial intelligence in the nuclear command and control and communication system at the presidential level. So keep AI out of the black book, the nuclear football, whatever term you want to use for it. Keep AI out of the nuclear football is the title of the article. Go read that and share it. And one of the reasons I wrote that is what we're talking about today. These AI models have been biased extremely. As a matter of fact, I think it was the Google one. They had to take it down completely because it wouldn't create a white pope in an image. It was so biased. Think about that. Read that article, spread it. We have to generate a debate about that inside the Department of Defense, how artificial intelligence is going to be used, because no killing decision should be made by anybody but a human being. No killing decision. That's Rob Maness's opinion, but especially at the nuclear forces level. All right, Monday is More War Monday. David Pine will be with me. We're going to talk and analyze the meeting that's happening tomorrow with President Trump and President Putin as to what the results of that are and where we're going to go from there. I'll see you then on the Rob Maness Show.